Okay, I think we are live. Let me go back to my webinar. Yes, we are live on Facebook. Welcome everybody officially, and welcome those of you who are already in on the webinar on Zoom. Today's session, we're going to be talking about the audit process. We're also going to be doing a bit of a deep dive into Receipt Bank. I think we're scheduled for an hour, but I don't think we're going to need to go anywhere near there. The beauty of Receipt Bank is that it's so easy to use that it doesn't take a lot of time to explain how to use it. So we will do a deep dive on the product, but before we do that, I'm also going to share with you some information about the audit process. So what actually happens when you go through an audit? What are the pain points to look out for? So let me just get our screen shared here. And I actually want to go into I've got Receipt Bank up, as you can see, but I want to go into my slide deck here. And let's kick off from the beginning. So we're gonna help you guys understand the audit process a little bit today. To do that, I'm going to go through a couple of key areas. I'm going to talk about the reverse onus, something that maybe you guys may or may not be familiar with, some of the top audit triggers, what to expect in an audit, how to prepare for an audit, and then of course, in preparing for an audit, we're going to dive into Receipt Bank and how to actually audit proof your business with Receipt Bank. Then we'll talk about some of the warning signs when an audit goes off the rails, what to do as far as damage control, and next steps beyond the actual audit process itself. So like I said, I think we won't need the full hour today, but if we open up, we'll open up for questions. I will do my best to monitor questions as we go, but it doesn't want to show me my other screen at the moment with the messages. So bear with me one second, everybody, as I'm going to plug in an external monitor so I can have the Zoom questions appear on that panel. So let's go back to you gotta love when technology doesn't want to work in your favor. My second monitor does not. Here. Working. Hopefully that solves it. Of course not. Joyce, bear with me just one second, everybody. And let's go in here. Put you back to our agenda. Bear with me one sec. Okay, I'm back and I have my second screen. So now I want to put my questions from Zoom up on my second screen here. Come on, computer, play nice. There we are. Okay. So I've got my Q&A up on my other screen. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to post them along the way. So I'm already on to the reverse onus here. So the reverse onus, this basically means that you have to prove that the information you provided is accurate. Unfortunately, it's sort of the opposite of the court system, where you're innocent until proven guilty. You are guilty until proven innocent when it comes to the audit process. So CRA's assumptions are presumed to be correct, and the taxpayers must disprove the accuracy of any assumptions. And the onus only shifts in a very limited number of cases, which means it requires you as the taxpayer to be proactive. So I'm not going to try and, well, I hope I don't scare you too much with what we're going to talk about when it comes to the audit process. You know, we've dealt with hundreds, if not thousands of these over the course of the year. And we do know that, it doesn't have to be scary and intimidating, but it can be overwhelming to you when you're learning the facts about the process. And it is important to make sure that we are dealing with the audits in a timely and respectful way, so that we can get the auditors working with us rather than against us, because really the onus is on the business owner to prove that the deductions are legitimate, that the information has been filed correctly, and it's really on us as business owners to do that, and us as accountants to help our business owners with that. I'm going to do one other thing here. Thank you for your patience, everybody. Where's my mouse? Oh, joy. There we are. Come on. Okay. I apologize, everyone. I'm just struggling with some technical issues right now. I got my mouse back at least. At least I did. There we are. Come on, computer. Okay, it doesn't want to work for me. Anyways, let's talk about some of the top audit triggers, which is probably something everyone's really interested in learning more about. So of course there's routine audits, right? These can just happen because you're a new filer, or just randomly selected. This is probably one of the most common ways that people are audited. Of course, and people know this, we've talked about the significant year-over-year variations in income and expenses. This is the reason we run a benchmarking analysis for our clients, is to identify those issues before CRA comes knocking at our door. But they use a very similar type of benchmarking analysis to compare over year-over-year comparisons, as well as comparisons to other industries. Now, that being said, it's normal to have some variation, and in fact, no variation can be just as much of a trigger as significant year-over-year variations. Just recognize that these are things that could be potentially be triggers for an audit. Another one that's an interesting one are unusual deductions. So one of the big ones here that we notice are charitable donations and tax shelters. This is obviously, there are many issues with a number of charities. So it's important to, if you're going to be making a charitable donation through the company, make sure that you've got all the documentation in place. I would, generally speaking, recommend making those charitable donations personally rather than through the corporation. But if you are going to make them through the corporation, to ensure that you've got all the documentation in place to make sure that you keep all those deductions. Expense claims by employees is another thing to be aware of that can be triggers. They're looking for double dipping here. So we want to make sure that that is not taking place. Recurring losses, like I said, or I maybe have not said this, typically after 3 years, if you have 3 years of recurring losses, a CRA will want to know that there's a realistic chance of profit for the business in the future. Now, this doesn't mean that just because you've had 3 years of losses that you're not entitled to deductions. Think about all the tech companies out there that when they're getting started are going to have year after year after year after year of loss as they invest in R&D and building out the technology, and only have the profitable years, down the road. So doesn't mean you're not entitled to those losses, but keep in mind that recurring losses could be an audit trigger of themselves. Requests for amendments to returns. So pretty much anytime that you're making an amendment, you're effectively filing a adjustment, which means CRA is going to have someone look at it. Doesn't guarantee that you're going to be reassessed, but again, it's another potential trigger. Worker complaints or EI claims, again, not normally typical for our small business owners who are typically the only owner manager and only employee in the organization. But if you do have employees and there are EI claims, that is something that could be potentially a trigger. Again, they're looking at independent contractor versus employee, personal service business issues, which we've all talked about many, many times and had many sessions on that. Demographic discrepancies are not keeping up with the Joneses. This is one that I find really quite interesting. What they're looking at here is they're actually looking, based on your postal code and where you live and your income levels, does the income that you're generating support the lifestyle that you have? Really what they're looking for is people who aren't reporting revenue. And that in and of itself could be an audit trigger if you are not making enough income based on where you live. And they do look at demographic discrepancies like that. There are also various CRA initiatives. We know within the IT industry, there was a special project put on to reassess many small business owners as personal service businesses. This goes back about 3 or 4 years. It has subsequently died. It's not an ongoing project at this point in time. But CRA does have various initiatives throughout time where they identify an area and actively target it. One area, for example, that they are actively targeting right now are the trades. There was an interesting court case maybe a month or two back. Actually, it was the results of a court case that had been ongoing for years with Home Depot. Home Depot, CRA had requested information on all the account holders who have Home Depot cards. They had requested all the information for the purposes of doing an assessment. And Home Depot fought that. They didn't want to release that information. Ultimately, they lost their case and were forced by the courts to turn over that information. And CRA is now using that information to assess tradesmen. As you can imagine, many tradesmen work under the table, cash basis. And now CRA is able to go and look at a Home Depot card and say, look, you've spent $100,000 at Home Depot and you're reporting $30,000 of revenue. What gives? And then they're able to drill in and potentially trigger full-blown audits at that point. There's also third-party information. There's things like leads programs where basically people can turn you in, offshore tax informant programs, the Panama Papers, which we heard, lots of people heard about. So lots of other third-party ways that people can trigger audits based on information that's been provided to you. Failure to provide requested information. So if you get a request to provide some information, maybe it's a payroll audit, a payroll desk audit, this can trigger a full-blown audit, or a GST audit can trigger a full-blown audit. If you're not providing information, we always tell clients this, you need to work with CRA, make sure that you're responding to any requests that they provide. Failure to do so will cause you far greater problems than providing the information. And then the other thing is insolvency proceedings. So if you're going bankrupt, again, hopefully not an issue for our clients here at all, but another potential audit trigger, as well as things like director liabilities for CPP, EI, GST, HST, these types of things that fall often in line with insolvency proceedings. So those are some of the most common audit triggers. Looks like we don't have any questions, which is great. There are other reasons outside of this, of course, that audits could be generated, but these are certainly some of the most common reasons. And then the other thing worth noting is that it doesn't mean every one of these will trigger an audit in and of themselves. These are just potential reasons for triggering an audit. So what should you actually expect when you go through the audit process? So something's triggered, you're about to go through this audit process. What should you expect? So first of all, not all audits are created equal, but this reverse onus sort of informs every aspect of the audits. So it's important to recognize that you really are on the hook to prove that the information you supplied to CRA is accurate, which means providing them with lots of information. And that information, audits, when they do go off the rails when you're not providing sufficient information, or you're providing information that is misleading or not clear, and the auditor is basically ill-informed, confused, or even suspicious about the process. So our goal and our objective when we're working with an auditor is just to provide clarity, help them understand. Typically, they're looking for something. They may have inferences that they've made. Those could be negative. We want to be able to provide answers to those. So one of the biggest things is making sure we're not providing incomplete documentation, which is why we think Receipt Bank is such an amazing and powerful tool, and why we're on a mission to get this tool in the hands of every small business owner. So we'll talk more about that in a second, but it really is, it cannot be overstated how important it is to keep records. It is your responsibility, and like I said, this reverse onus means you need to prove that the information is correct. CRA does not need to prove that it is incorrect. Electronic file management and control, we're going to talk specifically about that when we get into there. And we do want to make sure that we segregate sensitive and privileged materials. We are actually going to talk a little bit later about what information needs to be kept, what information can be purged. So we'll get into some of the weeds of that. But basically, you got to be prepared that when you go through this audit, they're going to request a fair bit of information. Hopefully, you have access to all this information at your fingertips. And the reality is that you do need to provide that information to CRA. So when you're preparing for an audit, it's important to recognize that generally speaking, CRA is entitled to anything that they request. So the Income Tax Act specifically states that records and books of accounts sufficient to enable the taxes payable or taxes required to be deducted, withheld, or collected to be determined. It's pretty broad. Anything that supports the taxes is information that they're entitled to request. In addition, they have the right to inspect records of any person for any purpose related to the administration or enforcement of the act. So for example, we have a client that we're going through a GST HST audit, and they have now requested personal bank accounts completely unrelated to the corporation, but they are entitled to receive that information because it's related to the administration and enforcement. CRA wanted to make sure that funds weren't deposited into the personal accounts. So they're entitled to that information. So we need to provide that to them. So some of the most common things that are requested in a CRA audit are receipts, invoices, banking documents, log and appointment books. Your automobile log is one of the most common areas being audited these days. So making sure that you have an automobile log and you're keeping track of that. And again, great technology. We're not going to be really going into that today, but QuickBooks Online now has a mileage tracker. MileIQ is another one that has a mileage tracker. They're ones that you can get like sensors that plug into your car. And now with GPS, it's so easy to actually do this. I really want to stress the importance of keeping these logs. Where we're in an era right now where CRA has clearly identified that not enough people are keeping sufficient logs. And so they're looking at this as a cash cow and they're drilling into it. So be prepared that audits on automobile expenses are one of the key areas they seem to be focusing on right now. They can request our working papers. So we keep specific working papers that support all of the information that we prepare. They're welcome to those. Minutes and resolutions, director shareholders minutes and resolutions. All of our clients know that we do prepare those for you, so it's not so much of an obligation or a risk for our clients, but some accountants don't actually prepare minutes. They require you to go to a lawyer to prepare those, and many people don't have those prepared, and they're a common issue. Obviously, all of your payroll records, and again, this can flow into requests of bank accounts and requesting information to confirm that information has been deposited corporately, personally, and to recognize that that's an area where they may drill into personal records. Notes and any supporting information like emails could be requested. Any electronically stored material, tax or accrual working papers, There's a case here they talk about BP Canada Energy versus Canada, where they were actually requesting a whole bunch of information, not really relevant for our client base. So I'm not gonna spend too much time on that, but another source of information that they can provide. As we talked about, providing information is a requirement. So how much information are you actually obliged to store and keep? And there is an obligation to record and retain records to up to 6 years from the last return. One of the things I think that's really interesting is there was a judge who was recently appointed to the Tax Court of Canada, and he was one of the first speeches he made in one of his first court cases. He said, "I didn't realize what an epidemic of floods that we have here in Canada." And he said that basically because this is what he was getting over and over again in all these court cases being presented to them, is people saying, my basement has been flooded, which is the equivalent of basically saying my dog ate my homework. People don't, judges don't believe that anymore. You do need to keep your records. Saying that they were lost in a flood, unless you've got proof that there was a flood in the form of an insurance claim, or a fire. You might have to have proof of insurance, as well as a police report. So just telling them that you had a flood is not going to be sufficient proof that you didn't, that those records have been destroyed, and it's not your fault. Now, there are situations where documents have been legitimately destroyed. I think one of the most notable cases that I often mention was a husband and wife who were going through a separation. It was not very amicable. And in the course of that separation, the ex-wife took the husband's belongings and lit them on fire. Now, he had a police report to be able to prove that this was an incident that had actually taken place. And as such, the judge still gave him 50% of the deductions that he claimed, even with no documentation. So not having documentation is definitely, like, he didn't get 100% of that. So he lost out on a bunch of deductions, but he had a legitimate reason. So there are reasons that you may have lost information that are legitimate, but even if they're legitimate, you risk losing a potential, an amount of those deductions. So it's really important to keep those records. Now, there is technically a rule that the records must be kept in Canada. There is a lot of flexibility. It says here that there's some flexibility on this requirement. There has never been any issues whatsoever, as long as the documentation can be provided and accessed. Ultimately, CRA has not cared where the documents themselves are stored. So as I mentioned earlier, there is a 6-year retention period. Now, we say it's 6 years from the notice of assessment. So it's not 6 years from today, I can purge anything that's more than 6 years old. It's 6 years from your notice of assessment. And in fact, that can actually be much longer, because you can think there are certain documents that might be older than 6 years, but pertain to current periods. Like the most common one, we do home loans. It's not uncommon to do a home loan from the company. And obviously the purchase of the home may be far longer than 6 years ago, but we of course need to keep the documentation on hand for the purchase of that to support the home loan all the way along, even into the 25th year. So there's lots of reasons why you may need to keep information longer than 6 years. 6 years is the minimum starting point. The reality is, again, thanks to tools like Receipt Bank, this doesn't have to be a pile of boxes down in your basement anywhere. This can be stored online. It doesn't take up any more space. We are providing this tool free of charge to all of our clients. So there's no cost to even maintaining these records anymore. So there's no reasons in my mind to keep data permanently forever, not just the 6 years. Now it's critical that you need to be able to provide that information for the last 6 years. However, I will mention that there is something called a statute barred limitation. which typically goes 3 years from notice of assessment. We'll talk about that a little bit later as we get more into this webinar. And I'm already realizing that I've gone far longer than I was expecting, so I better speed up the process a little bit here. There are some documents that are okay to purge. There are some documents that are advisable to purge. So we want to get rid of redundant documents, drafts that don't actually reflect the final product. So if there's things change and you have an original plan or draft invoices that didn't get submitted, those should be purged, right? We want to make sure that all the information that we keep in our records accurately reflects the final numbers that were prepared and sent to CRA. Obviously, we need to keep things like memos, as we talked about, any items that are relating to any issues under objection or appeal, even if they are, again, beyond that 6-year period. Even things like handwritten notes can be material and helpful. One of the things we talk about a lot with our customers is travel expenses and being able to deduct travel expenses. And what if you're going to the Caribbean or South America for legitimate business reason? The key is the documentation, right? You want to have minutes of the meetings that you're having down there, agendas, those types of things. So having all this documentation in these memos really goes a long way for helping you to defend that position. We're going to get into the product now here to talk to you a little bit about audit proofing your business with Receipt Bank, because this can seem a little bit overwhelming, having to keep all this information, having to be able to retrieve this information quickly and easily to be able to provide it to CRA. And the answer to this is really simple. It's this guy right here. It's a mobile app called Receipt Bank. I'm going to give you there's a little intro video here. For those of you who have not heard anything about it, I do want to just play this for you here. Let me just make sure my audio settings are good. I'll start this off. If you can't hear it, please let me know, because sometimes these webinars can be a little bit finicky.
You didn't go into business to do paperwork, but think about how much time you spend sorting through receipts and invoices. There is a better way. Submitting expenses on the go means no more missed deductions and no more Sunday evenings spent entering data. Plus, you'll have real-time visibility into your finances. With Receipt Bank, you just snap a photo of your receipt as soon as you get it. All the key data is extracted and sent straight to your accountant, along with the image. That means no more holding on to your receipts, and your accountant still gets the information they need quickly and easily. Whether you're entertaining clients, out on the road, buying office supplies, you can stay on top of your expenses with less time. You can forward digital invoices to your own unique email address, or Receipt Bank can collect them for you, hand-free. There's no need to worry about saving all your receipts in a shoebox. Instead, your documents are stored securely online, safe in the event of natural disaster, audit, or fraud. Paperwork has never been easier. Simply snap and go. Your accountant and Receipt Bank will take it from there so you can get back to doing what you do best, running your business.
So that gives you the elevator pitch on why I think Receipt Bank is a great product. Hopefully you guys are in agreement with me that this is an unbelievable product that's really going to revolutionize the way you approach keeping records. And it makes it so easy. So the next step is, how do you actually get set up? So if I can get my mouse back, here we are.
Go into business.
I want to talk to you about how to set up your account. So I've got a little training video here that walks you through how to set up your account. If you do not already have a Receipt Bank account, you can go onto our website, cpa4it.ca/receiptbank, or just go to cpa4it.ca, and right on the homepage, you'll see a link to get your free app. So you can go ahead and do that. I'll show you that link right now. So if you go to cpa4it.ca, the primary navigation or primary link right in the middle here says get your free app. So we go there, which takes us to cpa4it.ca/receiptbank. Here you'll see some more information. You'll see that video we just watched. It tells you a little bit more about the product, a little bit about why we think it's important, and then a form to fill in. This product is completely free of charge for our clients. It is not a free tool. It is a paid tool. If you go to receiptbank.com and set up your own account, there is a cost. I think they give you like a 1 week or 1 month free trial, but beyond that, it's $20 a month. We're giving this to our clients. As long as you're a client of ours, it is free, and we are paying for the license. So it is important to get that license by coming and filling in this form here. Don't go to receiptbank.com and fill in your information, because if you create an account on ReceiptBank, its unique identifier is your email address. So I will not be able to create an account for you if you've gone and created a demo account on the ReceiptBank platform. Okay. So now that we've done that, you've requested your account. We'll do some of the setup, but I want to walk you through some of the setup and the things that you can do. So I'm going to show you their little video on how to set up your account.
Training executive at ReceiptBank's London office. Today I'll be taking you through the first day on your new account, the steps you can take to make sure ReceiptBank is set up perfectly for your business. Let's log into the ReceiptBank website and take a look at your account. If this is the first time you've seen ReceiptBank, then welcome. This is the inbox, the place where your company's purchases will be stored and managed. But first, let's make sure that your account is set up in the right way. We'll be doing this in 2 steps, by importing your chart of accounts to ReceiptBank and by creating additional users who each have permission to submit and process your company's transactions. Click Account Settings to view and change the fundamental ways that ReceiptBank works with your business. The tabs on the grey sidebar give access to different sections of settings that you can customize, although they may look slightly different depending on which ReceiptBank product you're using. Let's click into the Categories or Maintain List tab to find your chart of accounts. These are currently set to a default pre-made option, but we want to import your own chart of accounts so that new purchases can be coded according to your existing financial records. There are 3 ways to do this: by integrating with an accounting software, by importing a CSV of your existing chart of accounts, or by manually creating a new chart of accounts in ReceiptBank. When you integrate ReceiptBank with another accounting program, we'll automatically sync your chart of accounts so that they match exactly between the 2 softwares. Do this by clicking on the Integration or General tab of the account settings, and then clicking Choose Software. After you've integrated, come back to the Categories tab to see your chart of accounts imported from your integration. If you can't integrate ReceiptBank with your accounting software, you can still import your chart of accounts as a CSV file. From the Categories tab, click Add a new list via CSV and upload the file containing your chart of accounts. Click to confirm the setup and see each of your accounts instantly rebuilt by ReceiptBank. If you can't source a CSV file containing your chart of accounts, click Add a new list, Manual Creation. Now type each nominal code that your business regularly uses to record its purchases. After you've set up your categories, whenever transactions are uploaded to ReceiptBank, they can be assigned the correct accounts and codes to keep your financial records accurate. Great. Now that we've set up how we code and describe our purchases, let's add some new users to our account so they can start submitting and processing transactions. Click on the Maintain Users tab of the account settings. Here you'll see a summary of all the people who have access to your ReceiptBank account. If you want to create a new login for someone, click Add a new user and fill in their details. Remember to click Notify User via email or SMS to send an invitation from ReceiptBank to their phone or email inbox. This will contain their login information and links to the website and mobile app. The last thing to be aware of here is the user role setting at the bottom of the window. It defines how much access this new user has in your ReceiptBank account. Basic users can only view and edit items that they've personally uploaded to ReceiptBank, but admin users can view and change anyone's transactions. After a new user has been created, you can change any of their associated details using the Manage buttons on this screen. And that's all you need to get started with ReceiptBank. Try adding some new users to your account, and after they've uploaded some transactions, coding them according to your chart of accounts. Watch the other videos in this series to learn more about submitting and processing items in ReceiptBank.
Okay, so that gives you your basic setup. Now, what I will let you know is if you request an account through us, we will add your basic chart of accounts. But I wanted to show this video in case you are using QuickBooks Online, your own account. Again, if we're doing bookkeeping for you, we'll connect it. However, if you're doing your own bookkeeping and have a QuickBooks Online or Xero account, you will need to do that connection yourself. In addition, you might have other people that you might want to add, your partner, other people working in your business. Maybe you have a separate bookkeeper working in your books. You may want to add additional users to be able to access this account. One thing that's great to know is if you do have a spouse that you work with and they happen to have their own business, you can set up multiple accounts on your mobile phone, and you can actually switch back and forth from multiple accounts, which is great. As for us as accountants, we're switching all the time back and forth from our clients, but we also have lots of clients who have multiple businesses, and so that's a benefit for them as well. Next, I do want to take you through, now we've got, in theory, our account set up. How do we actually submit paperwork so that it is stored electronically? So let's have a dive into that. This one's a nice short one. It's only about 2 minutes. And then it's our last video, and then
I'm a training
we'll do a dive in.
executive at Receipt Bank's London office. Today I'll be introducing Receipt Bank and the dedicated ways you can effortlessly upload your financial paperwork to the cloud. So what is Receipt Bank? It's a platform where you can record and manage all of your business's financial transactions. Whenever you upload pictures of your receipts, invoices, or other financial paperwork, they'll be stored in the cloud where they can be easily processed. And since you've already captured the image and the key document data, the financial records are already complete without having to copy out a handful of old receipts. So let's see this in action. I've just been given this receipt for a company purchase, and I'm not going to put it in my pocket. I'm going to put it in Receipt Bank. Let's open up the Receipt Bank mobile app and quickly take a picture. Now add any details that might help me or my co-workers identify it later, and press submit. And that's all there is to it. I can throw away this piece of paper and get on with my day. I've got peace of mind because that purchase is stored forever in Receipt Bank. I only need to check the mobile app if I need to review or edit information about my purchases. But what if I haven't got a physical copy of the paperwork? Here's an invoice that's been emailed to me. How can I upload this to Receipt Bank? Well, that's easy. Let's forward the email on to my unique @receiptbank.me address. If there's paperwork attached or in the body of the email, it will get extracted by Receipt Bank. And finally, there's the Receipt Bank website. Using my computer, I can log in here to take an in-depth look at all of my previously submitted purchases. Click on the Add Items button at the top of the screen and learn more about the Receipt Bank submission methods. This includes a space where you can drag and drop files directly from your computer, and all of the information you need to get started on the mobile app and email in submission methods. And that's all you need to get started with Receipt Bank. Try logging into the mobile app and the web app and submit your first items today.
So that shows you the basics of how to get information in. So the one thing that they do not have a video on is how to get information out.
Hi.
Oh, sorry, apologize. They do. So I thought we were done reviewing the paperwork. My apologies, guys.
Hi.
One last one.
And I'm a training executive at Receipt Bank's London office. Today I'll be taking you through the Receipt Bank inbox and how you can manage all of your business's paperwork from this singular collaborative space. Let's log into the Receipt Bank web app and take a look at our account. The first thing you see here is your inbox. This is where you receive all of your business's submitted paperwork. You can see a summary of who purchased the item, the supplier they bought it from, and how much they paid for it. If you're working with a large amount of paperwork, use the search and filter options to find transactions that fit your specifications in submitter, supplier, or date range. Let's look at one transaction in more depth. Click on the hyperlink in the type column to access the item details page. We can find an image of the receipt or invoice and all of its associated financial and contextual information. If you need to add or amend any of the details associated with this transaction, click into its field and enter the information. Each field will save automatically when you click elsewhere on the page. Once you're happy with how your transaction has been coded, process it using the black toolbar towards the top of the page. Using these buttons, you can add this transaction to an expense report, download it as a PDF or CSV file, or move it to the archive, the space used to permanently store processed paperwork. You can do all of this whether you're working from the inbox or the item details page. If you're in the inbox, remember that you have to select each item using the boxes down the left-hand side of the page before you can make any changes. If your account is integrated with an accounting software, then press the Publish button to send it across. Find out where it will be sent in the Publishing section of the item details page. The transaction will always be stored in the archive section of Receipt Bank if you ever need to find it again. And that's all you need to get started on Receipt Bank. Try logging into the web app today to see if any paperwork has already been submitted to your account. Once you're publishing,
I cut that off a bit prematurely. So as you can see, hopefully the tool is really an amazing tool for helping you to.
I'm Matt, and I'm a training executive at Receipt Bank's London office.
For enabling you to audit proof your business in a really easy way. The one thing I will always mention to everybody is that the hardest part of using Receipt Bank is creating the habit. Yes, you can send receipts via email. Yes, you can batch scan and upload to their website, but this is your number one tool, people. If you get in the habit of every time you make a purchase, you pull this out, you take a picture, it takes a second to do it, and then you're done with it. And if you get in that habit, you'll never have to worry about going through an audit again, because all of this information, all that source document is searchable and reproducible and easy to provide to CRA. So you can do this with receipts. You can do this with anything that's not even a expense related document. If you want to put in copies of contracts, if you want to put in copies of anything that's important, that can all be uploaded and provided to the Receipt Bank account. Now I was going to quickly, if I can dive in here for a second, because I did want to show you the export functionality and the search functionality, because they mention it, but they don't dive into it in detail. So the advanced search, you can see that you can search by a lot of different things, by an amount range, a date range. This is most common. You're usually looking for, when you do go through an audit, they're going to want specific items from a specific account during a specific range is the most common approach. They will say, I want to see, give me all your automobile expenses from January to March in 2017. So you can come in here and you can put the date range. You can choose a payment method if you want, or category. So for example, let's say we say, automobile expenses, that's my fixed asset, the automobile expenses, and I can put that in a date range and be able to find that. So it's really easy to be able to find those and search that information. That'll come up with a result, and then you can just simply select everything from your result, click the export button, and you have two options here. You can export as a CSV. This is the information that the auditors are typically going to want to start with. They want to see the supporting documentation, the transactions that make up the journal. And there's a couple of different options. You can do a Receipt Bank default, which is a great one because it includes a link to the supporting image, which the auditor can click on. If you have enabled online access, they can click on that link and be able to go to the receipt. That is at your control. If you don't want that information publicly available, you can restrict that. But if you do enable it, then they can just literally click on the hyperlink and see the image. You also have options for QuickBooks, QuickBooks Desktop, Sage 50. So a lot of these traditional desktop platforms obviously don't sync natively with Receipt Bank the way QuickBooks Online and Xero do, but you can export this information so that in addition to being an audit proofing tool, it's a tool to minimize the amount of data entry required. And so QuickBooks is one common method, but another way that you can use this information, if you are using our CRED manual, you can take pictures of all your receipts, upload all your receipts through the portal, and then export it as a CSV and dump that into our CRED file and eliminate a lot of the data entry that you might have had to do in the past with any director paid expenses. Maybe you were importing a CSV from your bank already, but all those director paid expenses now can be imported from Receipt Bank really nicely and really easily. In addition, you can also do a PDF archive, which is going to just give you the actual images. So the CSV is going to give you a link to the image. So again, if you don't want to provide that information out publicly, you can download a PDF. And when you download the PDF, it's going to have an ID with every image associated with it. I should have done a much smaller search. I will learn my lesson in a second. Let's actually, you know what? Instead of having 100, there we are. It's already ready. There's 107 images downloaded, ready to go. I can look at this and we can see there's the image and it's got an item ID, which is searchable. Let's get out of here and let's try and find another one so I can show you an example. So you can see it's found that receipt ID. So it's easy to search. And then if I also go back here and export, sorry, if I export this, if I go back and export the CSV, no, let's actually filter this. Just so we don't have as many, it doesn't take as long to do. Do a quick search for the transactions from this month. No, that's, what did I do wrong here? There we go. Okay, so we've got a much more manageable list. So we're going to export that. We're going to do a CSV format. I'll use the Receipt Bank default. Generate that. I can download that. So I've enabled the hyperlinks. So first of all, I have a Receipt Bank ID. So that's searchable. If I went back to that PDF, I could then search by that Receipt Bank ID. Or even better yet, I've got a permalink that is embedded in the document that I can just take and paste that into a URL. In fact, if I control clicked it, it would have worked too. And you can see I can go to that actual image quite easily. So the search, the sort, the ability to be able to provide this information quickly and easily is unparalleled. That's why I love what this technology can do for us. I think it really is incredibly powerful, and I think it's an incredible opportunity to make this process easy and to ensure you don't lose out on any deductions that you're legitimately entitled to just because you can't locate the paperwork. So we're on a mission, like I said, to get this product in the hands of every small business owner here in Canada so that you do not lose out on legitimate deductions that you are entitled to. Now, some of the signs that maybe these audits, getting back into the audit process, that some of these audits have gone off the rails, is if the auditor starts commenting on missing or inconsistent documents. So like the key to this, we're trying to get you to the point where you don't have that missing information, because you start having missing information, it's going to go off the rails really quickly, and they're going to start drilling into other areas. If you cannot provide the documentation and expenses for a 3-month period for one category, the assumption is you can't do it across the board, and they're going to start digging deeper. So you want to be on a lookout for making sure that the auditor is not asking for the same information more than once, or that there's any inconsistency in of any documents. Repetitive question. So if the client is asking the same question, or the auditor is asking the same question again, it means we have not provided clarity. So we want to make sure that we get on that and we deal with it. And if there's any questions pertaining to credibility, these are warning signs that you could be in danger of this, creeping in scope and becoming probability of a massive reassessment. And of course, if the scope of the review actually just starts to expand without warning, if they start to ask more and more information, or of course, if they're complaining that you're not actually cooperating. So the key is understanding that this is a person that you're dealing with. They have a job to do. Don't treat them like the enemy. Treat them with respect. Provide them the information accurately and quickly, and they will treat you with that same respect. And you can find that you can skate through these audits when you have systems like Receipt Bank in place so that you can locate that information quickly and easily. And again, just, signs of confusion, skepticism. If they're fixating on some specific documents that really don't matter, those can be warning signs that this has gone off the rail. When things go off the rails, it's really critical, if you're dealing this with on your own, to make sure that you're bringing in a knowledgeable professional, because being penny wise and pound foolish can be very dangerous when you're dealing with an audit. So, our clients, again, if you're on a prepayment plan with us, you got the audit representation protection included. It's not going to cost you anything to have us there and have us working with you on that audit. We've dealt with these. We know how to deal with those issues. We know how to identify those issues. If you're starting to get these signs of skepticism or confusion, bring in an expert to help you deal with it and get it resolved as quickly as possible. What do you do when it's gone off the rails and you've got issues? Like I said, bring in reinforcement and bring in reinforcements like a professional accountant, sometimes even a tax lawyer if necessary. Insist on resetting the agenda and focusing on what are the key elements. It's not uncommon for us to sit down with an auditor and say, look, what is the objective here? At the end of the day, the auditor has the right to request a lot of information. We do have an obligation to work with the auditor, but we can also guide the direction of this, and we can push them to identify what are the areas, what are they concerned about, what can we do to provide this information? And then, of course, write letters summarizing information. Don't just provide the information that you've been requested. You're free to provide a summary explaining how that information relates to your business, particularly when it's gone on to these things of maybe he's drilling into other areas that are irrelevant, pointing back to why this is relevant, why this is related to the business. Of course, if it gets to that point where you are just at a stalemate, you should really just disengage and save your energy for the objection stage. After an audit, you do have the ability to object, and there is an appeals process, and there's 3 levels of appeals. It looks like we have some Q&A, so I'll jump in there. But there's a whole process in the appeals process. And then even beyond the appeals process, you can go to tax court, Federal Court of Appeals, Supreme Court of Canada. So there are options beyond the audit process. And sometimes it's just better to throw your hands up and say, you know what, do your reassessment. I'm going to fight it and I'll deal with it. And then there are some documents that we can request around the process that provide us clarity, that provide a whole, they have to keep a lot of records around their process. It's a very formalized structure, an audit, believe it or not. And they keep records of all communication. We can request those documents. Those documents provide a lot of clarity into where their state of mind was that can help us resolve that. But let me jump over into the Q&A now, because I see a few questions. Does it work for Quicken with Quicken for Business? No idea. I'm not a big fan of Quicken for Business, but I would think if there's an import in Quicken, you should be able to import this, and in theory, it should work. Haven't done it, haven't tried it. What I'd recommend is just put in a few transactions, export it, and see if you can import it. I know that there is no actual Quicken download, but probably one of the other formats will work just fine. And you can always manipulate the CSV to put it in whatever order or process that Quicken is expecting. Can I submit to Receipt Bank my previous year's receipts and documents? Absolutely, you can. And I highly encourage it. Whether you want to, if you're using something like QuickBooks or Xero, I probably wouldn't recommend syncing with QBO, although you could. One of the things we didn't even touch on, if I can jump back over to Receipt Bank for a minute, is Receipt Bank has a feature that I think is pretty darn cool. I don't know if you guys will think it is as cool as I do. Where are we here? Let me jump out of here for a second. Did I close my browser? No. Pardon me. One of the things that I think is really, really cool is this match feature. So we have this match column. They don't have any matches right now because this is mostly like sample data that's clean. I'm trying to see if I can refresh this, go back to all my things. Hopefully there's go to my inbox. So I got my entire list. Don't have any matches to show you, but this match column here, if it finds, if you're connected to QBO and it finds a transaction that's already in QBO or zero, it notifies you that there's a match, and it will allow you to basically insert the document into the existing transaction. So yes, definitely go back and do prior years. You can bulk scan. So the iPhone, like I said, it's a great tool going forward. If you're going back to do, a year, 2 years worth of information, I would recommend going out and buying a Fujitsu scanner. The iX500 is an amazing scanner. It's only a couple $100. It'll take receipts down to like this big. You can stack multiple of them. Number one tip I will give you is that if you're going to do that, don't sort your receipts by date or by vendor, because that doesn't matter with Receipt Bank because it's going to pull out all that information anyways. What you actually want to do is sort your documents by size, because when you're putting them through the sheet feeder, if you put all your documents in together that are all the same size, you'll have less issues with them like being de-skewed and pulled sideways, and all those type of things. The other issue that you'll have when you're back scanning is all the receipts that are stapled together. I mean, every store seems to staple together like the terminal receipt as well as the actual receipt from the cash register, which is nice like in a paper world, but in a digital world, it's a pain in the butt. So go back and do all those with your phone as opposed to a sheet fed scanner, because they'll jam up your scanner because it doesn't take staples very well. You'll either have to separate them out. I would advise just doing those ones with your mobile phone. So separate your receipts that have staples in them, organize your receipts by paper size, and then run them through your sheet feeder. So hopefully that answers your questions. I didn't think we would use the full hour. I apologize, I was mistaken. This is our first pass at the Audit Proofing Your Business webinar. I hope you guys found it useful. I'd love to hear your feedback. If you guys have any comments, suggestions on ways that we can improve this, whether it's worthwhile in doing this again for other clients. We've got a pretty decent turnout. See, a number of you are still on right now. It'll be interesting to see how this trended on Facebook. But I'd love to hear your comments. Was it useful? Was it helpful? Do you have any other questions? Is there anything else that we can do? What are some webinars that you'd like to see from us in the future? Because we're looking to develop and drive more content for our customers. So tell us what you need to hear. What would be useful for you guys? We'd love to know. Thanks, Phil. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Ron's using MasterCard for all his purchases. Is there a way to match my receipts to the MasterCard records? Yes, that would be with something like Xero or QBO. That's where that match will come up. If you are linking that MasterCard into QBO or Xero, it will match those transactions. First, it'll tell you there's a match if the transaction already exists in QBO. And then, of course, when you go into QBO, if you push or publish the transactions from Receipt Bank into QBO, you go through your bank feed and you'll match up the MasterCard transaction with the actual scanned receipt. And that's the goal and the objective here, right? Is an audit proof set of books means every transaction on your corporate debit card and corporate credit card have a supporting receipt. So that is an audit proof set of books when you can literally get drill down capability by going through your records and being able to click on it. That is the gold standard. QBO receipt bank hyperlinked back down to the original receipt. The silver standard is you're using receipt bank and you can pull up and you can locate this information with searches. Of course, the problem does arise if you were just using receipt bank not connected to QBO, that there could be a discrepancy between what you have in receipt bank and what you have in QBO. Maybe not all the receipts got scanned in receipt bank versus what you actually entered in whatever system that you ended up using, whether that's Excel or QuickBooks Desktop or MYOB or Quicken or whatever the case might be. So you could end up with that discrepancy, which again, as we mentioned earlier in this audit process, when you have discrepancies, those are potential issues. I know we're about a minute over time. I will mention one other feature as a little bonus here. There's expense reports, which we're not even really going to get into, but it's a great tool you can use if necessary for like doing expense reimbursement to yourself. But the other thing I want to show you is you can code suppliers to specific accounts. Like I could say all wins is always going to be business promotion, and then it will automatically categorize it, which is one nice thing that you can do. And in fact, let me even show you one additional item that they didn't really cover very much. So let's add some costs or bank data. One of the things they didn't talk about was invoice fetch. They didn't talk about it because it's only recently released. And so it's still technically in beta. I can browse to say Amazon, and I can connect my Amazon account. What happened here? I clicked on the Amazon instead of hitting add. So I can add that, and it will fetch all the transactions from Amazon. That's not my account, so I'm not going to actually connect it right now. But you can connect various online applications, including your bank. So if I want to add bank statements, I can add bank data, and I can do a bank fetch on those as well. So again, all that information can come through. Caveat on this, it's screen scraping. It's not 100% reliable. You've got to come in and check periodically. Like I can see right now, like I've got 14 statements fetched, but now it's telling me incorrect login credentials. So multi-factor authentication has failed. I got to go in and put in, I got to authenticate again to be able to pull the information. It's also not super timely. It does work. It's similar to what you've seen in HubDoc, similar quality as HubDoc on the fetch side. It breaks, until the banks create an open API, you're going to have this issue of bank feeds breaking all the time. The connections to the other suppliers like Amazon and Best Buy, they do work better, but some of them are prone to screen scraping. Some of them are open through APIs. So again, thank you guys. Thank you guys for joining me. I know I've got a little bit long. Thank you for those of you who stuck with me. It looks like the majority stuck with me as we ran a little bit long there. Again, I'll open it up if you guys have any questions, but if you don't have any questions, we would, as I said, please send us your feedback. Please send us your suggestions. Oh, I do have another. Restaurants give you 2 receipts, one detailed and the MasterCard receipt, which includes the tip. Do I need to keep the 2? Yes, it's advisable to keep the 2. When you take a picture of a receipt, in fact, if you go back to that receipt, you see I took a picture of both. So I have the original receipt and so the original receipt and the machine receipt as well, which has the tip on it. So what you do is just put them side by side, and it's going to be able to pull out the information and the tip and everything. So it's going to make it better. It's going to make the tax far more accurate. One of the key things here is knowing and understanding how it deals with tax. Receipt Bank is really, really good. It doesn't use just like a programmatic 13% or anything like that. it's actually pulling the tax number. So it's going to pull the tax right off the file. So it's going to be able to say, okay, $6.01 of this bill is taxed, which you can clearly see is not 13% of the total bill, right? And that's important to know, because if they just use 13% of $61, they would get a wrong tax number. If you're on quick method, it doesn't matter. If you're on the long method, it would be an issue. Yeah. So yeah, no problem, Heather. I'm glad it was interesting to hear about the Home Depot release of information. You're going to see more of that, right? With more and more electronic data flying around, that data is going to, you've got to assume it's going to be at the fingerprints of CRA eventually, which, you know, as long as you're honest and trustworthy and representing the facts, it's not something you should be intimidated by. If you're a tradesman who is doing stuff on a cash basis, I would be extremely concerned. What about accuracy? Do I have to validate each scan if all the fields have been filed correctly? Yes, in theory, you're supposed to confirm the accuracy of the information. If you go back to the screen, you'll notice, if I go to my inbox, you'll notice that you basically have these things where it says green, not ready. So when it says green, it basically thinks that it's captured all the information with 100% accuracy. If it doesn't think it's captured all the information, like here, it wasn't able to pull the supplier. So it helps to identify those ones. I found it to be highly, highly, highly accurate. Like even in this one, and the number one thing I have noticed is it's user error. The problem becomes that the receipt is either like blurry, because I've been known to like be too quick and not make sure my photo is crisp and readable. In this case, it's got an unknown supplier. So it wasn't able to pull, because you can see the way the teller ripped it off, she ripped off the top of it, so it doesn't have the merchant name on it. So again, user error. So I can fill that in. I happen to know exactly who that was. That was Domino's Pizza. And there's also like, I mean, as you get into this, you can do splits, you can do more advanced line item breakdowns. The tool is a really powerful, really amazing mistake. It's also AI driven, as you can imagine, as everything is these days. So when you report a mistake, so if it's inaccurate, you can report a mistake, and you're done. The other thing you'll notice, I don't have to hit save anywhere, right? The minute I make a change and click out of that field, it remembers that information. Okay, so the minute I click out of here, it's remembered that change. So you can see the little green click mark. So you don't have to worry about saving it. As soon as you go into a field and update it, it's done. A whole bunch of advanced things. You can do messages. So like if you want to communicate back and forth with your bookkeeper, with your accountant. So again, if we're doing this, we may request information in there for that. So I hope that answers your questions. And again, thanks everyone for staying a little bit late. We still got most of you here. But on that note, I'm probably gonna end the session. So thank you very much, everyone. Like I say, we would really, really appreciate your feedback as to how useful this session was. We'd love your feedback on what sessions you'd like to see coming down the road. We want to be developing content that's valuable for you. Yeah, okay, great. So the chat's up there. I'll have to take a look on Facebook and see if there was any messages on there really quick before we bounce off of that, just in case there were any questions on Facebook. Although I apparently have closed the Facebook window, so I won't be able to answer any questions from Facebook. But what I will do is I'll go in and I'll answer them on Facebook if there was any questions there. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day, and we'll talk soon. Sorry, last person is joining late. Cost, beauty of it is it's free. There is a cost on their website that they do charge. We have a bulk license. We are paying the license on behalf of our clients. We recognize the value of this tool so much that we have purchased a license for all of our clients, and we are providing it as a value add, the services that we provide. So for you, there is absolutely no cost. For us, there is a cost, but we think it's well worth it, and the positive goodwill that we're creating for you guys by doing this, and as well, the ability to improve our accuracy and our ability to keep more of your money in your pocket. And we've noticed that when we do that, you guys are happy, you make referrals to your friends, and it pays for itself just with happy clients. So no cost to you. Thanks, guys. I'm going to close it off now.